Greetings fellow Tenno, it's super effective here. The Specters of the Rail update has come for Warframe, but if you're like me and have been playing since before this update, some things have been moved around and may be causing a little bit of confusion. So I'm going to cover some of this update's most burning questions, such as, what's become of the Void? Where are the Prime items at? How do I use these relic things? What's new with archwings? And how does one acquire a space kitty cat? So let's start by covering the new star map. This star map is actually a revamp of the original one Warframe had a long time ago. Other than an obvious visual update and adaptation to the current modern Warframe mission types, there is a new node called a junction. These junction nodes aren't really a mission, but represent a final gateway for new players to overcome before they can move on to a new planet. Whereas before, you had to get a nav segment from the final boss to gain access to the next planet. Now most of you will find these junction nodes useless at first, as you probably already have the next planet unlocked, or perhaps you already have the rewards it gives. However, understand that these junctions were designed to introduce new interesting content to new players. Anyways, navigate over to planet Earth, and with your cursor, highlight but don't select the Mars Junction node. A new UI will be presented to you listing a number of easily readable objectives. And below that is a display of rewards that cycles automatically. You must complete all these objectives to be granted all the listed rewards, the most important of which is the third item called a Void Relic segment. Don't worry, I'll wait for you to come back. Great! Since you've completed all the objectives for this junction, you should now enter the mission. Upon arrival, you'll see a small room with a console and a force field which blocks a larger room which contains a mini boss. This is the Specter of the Rail. Who's basically an AI-controlled Warframe. Most of you will probably destroy that poor Frost, but for new players he may be more challenging. Once you've made Frost into a little puddle of Warframe water, head over to the console behind him and activate the the junction rail to Mars. You will then be rewarded with all 3 items from that junction. When you return to your ship, head towards the right side of your armory. There will be a new station to activate with your newly acquired Void Relic segment. Now I'm going to explain these Void Relics. Void Relics are basically your old keys that were used to get into the Void before this update. They've been converted over and grouped into eras instead of tiers. Tier 1 keys are now called Lith Relics, T2 keys are now called Meso Relics, T3 keys are now called Neo Relics, and T4 keys are called Axii Relics. Within each era, the Void Relics also have another naming convention, such as F2, M1, S2, etc. I do not yet know what these letter number combinations mean yet, but I assume that they're just a way to uniquely identify them. Select one and you'll see a loot table unique to that relic and the odds of each item dropping. Below the loot table, you'll also be presented with something called Void Traces. Void Traces are a new resource that you can spend here to upgrade a Void Relic, thus improving your drop chances. You can place your cursor over each of these prices to preview how these odds will be affected. The more of your Void Traces you spend, the lower chance the common items will appear, and the more likely uncommon and rare items will appear. Now it is very important that you keep an eye on the amount of Void Traces you collect, because you can only hold so much. But don't worry, because when you upgrade a Void Relic, it will still be kept in your inventory so you can save them up for whenever you want to use them. Now you may be asking, how do I get Void Traces? To explain this, we'll need to first go back to the navigation map. At the top right, you'll notice a new icon that looks like a flame icon. Selecting it will show you a list of Void Fissure missions. These missions will not disappear when you complete them, so you can play them as many times as you want within the time limit. But once the time limit expires, a new one will take its place. The enemy levels listed on the mission are just as they were before. However, the Void Fissure icons beside each mission represent the tier of difficulty of the enemies that will emerge from that Void Fissure. 1 being the equivalent of a T1 key, level 20 to 30, and 4 obviously being a T4 equivalent, level 40 to 50. Selecting a Void Fissure mission will present you with a list of Void Relics that you currently own based on the difficulty tier you selected. To proceed, you can choose to equip a relic to get a shot at its loot table, or you can choose not to equip one and play the mission normally by hitting that button at the bottom right. Doing so will prevent you from collecting the loot table rewards, but you can still collect Void Traces and other normal drops. For your first Void Fissure mission, I recommend selecting a relic of which you have a large number of just to get the hang of it, and if possible, contains a reward that you're interested in. These missions play out just like any other normal mission where you must complete the objective that you've been given. However, since this is a Void Fissure mission, you will have the added objective to locate and seal the Void Fissure using the Void Relic equipped. The Void Fissure looks like a floating golden tear which appear randomly on the map, but aren't super hard to find. Approach the Void Fissure and activate it. The Void Fissure will drain some of your Warframe's energy and your Void Relic will begin to orbit around the Void Fissure. You'll be given a few minutes to kill the Void enemies that appear, who randomly drop an item called a reactant. These reactants behave just like power cells from excavation missions, in that you need to pick them up and bring them back to the Void Fissure. Each reactant will progress the sealing process by 10%, so you'll need to retrieve 10 of them to complete this task. If you find that the Void Fissure isn't taking your reactant, try jumping up into the Void Fissure since it's floating. During the fight, keep an eye out for Eximus enemies emerging from the Void Fissure, as they will drop Void Traces, which at the time of this video look like this. To optimize your Void Trace gain, I recommend you fill the Void Fissure up to 90% and let the timer run up to the last moments to enable more Eximus the opportunity to greet you. You can also bring additional squad mates to increase the likelihood that an Eximus will appear, and don't forget about bringing a Necros and if possible item drop boosters, which will greatly improve the amount of Void Traces that drop from Eximus bodies, especially if they are sliced in two. Once you've sealed the Void Fissure, you must now continue the mission's normal objectives. Please note that if you fail to seal the Void Fissure or the normal mission, your Void Relic will not be consumed. Only if you successfully complete both objectives, then will your Void Relic be consumed in exchange for a reward from that Void Relic's loot table. Now that I've explained all these new parts regarding Void Relics, Fissures, and Traces, I'm going to explain a bit of the dynamics when it comes to the benefits of this new system. There is a significant bonus to playing in groups. Each player can shoot for whatever loot table they want within the same tier, rather than be restricted to the same loot table and duplicates of the same item. Optionally, if all players want the same item, they can decide to use the same relic, with each player getting their own loot roll from the same table. Upon completing a Void Fissure mission, you will now see the rewards that your party members have received. The super awesome thing about this screen is that if someone else receives something you want more, you can opt to grab a copy of their item instead. As an added bonus, the player whose item was copied will be rewarded with bonus Void Traces per copy. Don't forget that if everyone used relics that have been upgraded to their max potential using Void Traces, then you have multiple decent rolls at getting some really rare items. Gone are the days of having to constantly slog through another 20 to 40 minute Rotation C death march just to get a former blueprint yet again. Okay, now let's get on to some of the other things that's changed. The market received a facelift. You can now search for items, and the UI is cleaned up quite a bit. Most importantly are the blueprints, which have seemingly disappeared, but they have now been grouped under the item of the same name. Selecting the item will show purchase methods at the top right, the default of course being platinum and the blueprints being under credits. But if the item must be researched at a clan dojo in order to build, this will be indicated as such. Archwing movement has been overhauled so you can now fly in full 360 freedom, making it feel a lot more fluid, yet some Tenno have reported experiencing some motion sickness. Blah. There are also two new Archwing mission types, Rush on Kepler Phobos and Pursuit on Pandora Saturn. Rush is pretty straightforward, just blitzkrieg through the course and shoot or avoid the stasis mines along the way. You must reach the end of the course and destroy some transports before the time runs out. Eat Cell may be the best choice of Archwing for this mission. However, Pursuit could use a little bit of explanation. The Grineer ship you have to chase is pretty maneuverable and is armed with a variety of countermeasures. But just note that you can keep shooting while boosting. When you get up and close, you need to disable the engines, which are ironically not the exhaust itself, but these small glowing bits on the back of the ship. Once the ship's engines are down and the craft is drifting, swing around to the front and shoot these similar looking glowing bits on the front of the ship to disable the shields. Once that is done, just shoot the ship until it's dead in the water. You will then be tasked to defend the craft against other Grineer enemies who will try to prevent its capture by destroying it. Now finally on to Space Kitty Cats, or rather the fresh hell. That is the super grind of getting your very own Kavat. Well, assuming you've chosen not to drop platinum for a starter pack, obtaining a Kavat is a little different than a crew bro. You can acquire the Kavat Incubator Segment Blueprint for your landing craft from a Tenno lab in the clan's dojo. This will require an Argon and 10 Kavat genetic codes to build. However, I recommend holding off on this because it has a decent chance to drop from crazy space cat ladies, who you'll frequently encounter while farming up Kavat genetic codes. First, equip a codec scanner in your gear which is needed to scan Feral Kavats. Feral Kavats are very hard to see when they are passively roaming, but will reveal themselves if they are attacked and can also be spotted through walls using a scanner. Each scan will yield a very rare chance to provide you with genetic codes. This may also prove difficult because they are very fast, jump along walls, and don't take kindly to paparazzi. To combat this, I recommend equipping yourself with a Warframe who can provide crowd control. Just be cautious when using companions or AoE weapons and damaging abilities, for you risk killing the Feral Kavats. Through testing, I can confirm that using a synthesis scanner will also work. However, a Helio Sentinel won't scan Feral Kavats. You'll only find a few groups of Feral Kavats on Orokin derelict missions, but I recommend OD Exterminate because the Feral Kavats will count as elimination targets and will be tracked on the minimap. Adding more party members will also increase the number of Feral Kavat packs on the level. Now I know I haven't covered every single detail about this update, only the parts that I felt needed explanation. For more detail, you can check the full patch notes and other helpful links in the description down below. Anyways, that's what I have to share for now. If this video was helpful to you at all, drop a like, share, and subscribe. I'd like to thank all my viewers for their questions, feedback, and support, and especially you for watching. See you next time.
And his name is John C.
Soft kitty, warm kitty, little ball of fur.
Play of the game.